The only thing was you couldn't go on the beach because that was all mined and there were barriers to stop you going. So although we lived at Skegness, which you thought would have been ideal, you know, for the summertime with the beach and everything, you just couldn't use it because all the hotels and boarding houses were billeted to the army. They were all there. So, and then the sailors at Butlins Holiday Camp, which was now the Royal Arthur. So that was what the streets of Skegness were full of, soldiers and sailors.
Can you remember how many times bombing occurred in Skegness?
Well, as far as I can recall, I lost this little friend of mine. And then there was, I think, 2 or 3 times. Oh, there was one when we lived at Ingermells, which wasn't far from the Royal Arthur. That's why we moved to Skegness. There was a very, very bad raid, and there were a lot of animals killed in the fields. They could see where they'd been. There were craters and things like that, because they just misjudged where the Royal Arthur was. So that made us move from there to Skegness. And then that was the biggest one that I can remember. And then there was the one where I lost this little friend.
As a child during the Second World War, did you ever find it exciting or an adventure?
I didn't even think about it. I knew that when the sirens went, we had to take a gas mask with us to school in a little cardboard box around her neck. We had to go everywhere with that. But apart from that, and being deprived of ice cream and chocolate and stuff like that, you know, all the things that children love, I didn't really bother me.
When you were a child, can you remember anything that you found amusing that occurred during the Second World War?
It was about a lady who was rather large, and she was on the beach with a little tiny husband who was very thin, and she's got a great big one of those bathing, you know, rings, you know, that you inflate, and she got this poor little man to puff and blow and get this inflated. And while she stood there watching him, everybody on the beach was fascinating to see if he was going to be able to do it. And then when he'd done it, she sat on it and it burst. Well, the whole of the beach were absolutely in fits. And that stayed with me all through the war. It was one of those funny things that happened just before the war. Because after that, we weren't allowed to go on the beach because it was all mined. And well, one particular day, my mother had to go into town, and she left my sister and I, who was older than I was, with a friend while she went. Well, of course, the sirens went while she was out, and we were left there worrying our hearts out what would happen to her. And when we eventually, the all clear went, my mother came down the road on a bicycle, as if nothing had happened, not a care in the world. Then when she came home, she said that while the air raid was on, she dived under the nearest hedge, and a little old lady had done the same thing. And when the raid was over, the old lady had lost her shoes and she couldn't find them anywhere. They'd been blown completely off her feet. So that was a funny aspect of the war. After the war, I remember VE Day, and that was when I was just turned 12, and we all went to the front on that particular day and met, and on the parade cinema at Skegness front there was a whole lot of sailors from HMS Royal Arthur, and there was one lone sailor that sang "We'll Meet Again" in the lovely still night, and it was beautiful, and there wasn't a dry eye anywhere, as you can imagine. It was beautiful. So that was the end of the war for me. Over 70 years later, I stood on the tarmac at Coningsby with my veteran aircrew husband and my family. It was a day to commemorate those airmen who flew on their missions during the war. Coningsby is the home of today's Royal Air Force, and also the base for Bomber Command's memorial flight, the City of Lincoln Lancaster bomber together with the Hurricane and Spitfire. These was joined by the only other flying Lancaster that had come all the way over from Canada to tour this country, and the day was made more special as the two Lancs sat side by side on the tarmac. We were gathered there together with many fellow veteran airmen to receive their well-deserved clasps in recognition of their service by Bomber Command. The summer weather had been lovely, and we hoped this would continue for this special day. But the British summer lived up to its reputation, and the heavens opened, so the planned flight of two veteran aircraft was unable to take place. They continued to sit side by side on the tarmac. Seating in front of them were the veteran airmen. One by one they were called to receive their clasps. A short synopsis was made of each of the war exploits of each one. Then they were photographed in front of the planes. Those who could stood, others in wheelchairs. We were able to talk to and meet the crews of the two Lancs, a very great honour, and it was so moving to see the light in the eyes of those old airmen, some infirm, and that sparkle of adventure was still there. It was a privilege and an honour to share this day with them, a day I remember and treasure for the rest of my life. Rosemary C.W. Dorricott, wife of Flight Lieutenant Leonard William Dorricott, DFM, August the 8th, 2014.
Your husband Len was a navigator in
right.
the Lancasters. Did Len talk much about his experiences in the Lancasters?
Only later. He didn't talk much about it at all, because I think when people had been through all that and then it was all over, it was something they wanted to put at the back of their minds and forget and get on with civilian life and make a go of civilian life and forget all that. And it wasn't until later, when all the Bomber Command stuff came up, that he really started to talk about it. And I have got a file full of all his bits and pieces of all what he did in the war, and all the photographs of all the several squadrons he was with, and the pilots and everything, and he's talked about them since then more. So we've been going through that, and I've made files of everything he had to do with that. I thought it was a very, very good way to keep it alive, and hopefully it's going in the archives, so that will be something for them to have, amongst many other people's memoirs and things that they've sent into the archives. And his logbook is going there. He was attached to an Australian squadron, the 460 squadron, and the Lancaster G for George was the plane he flew in, was gifted to the Australian government by this government thanks for what they did during the war, and is now in the Canberra War Museum, to which I hope I can send his logbook, his original logbook, so that it can sit near his beloved plane. And I just hope they'll accept that.